What's up, guys? I just don't like the lighting. It's Dominique, aka that therapist. Okay, I'm the lead clinician and CEO for a group practice known as Yellowbird Counseling, and we provide individual, couples, family, and group therapies, but also we do lives every Thursday evening to help educate the general population on reasons that we could all benefit from a therapist outside of simply just having a mental illness, because the stigma is that you think that most people have, or a lot of people have, many people have, is that you have to have something wrong with you to be going to therapy. It can't just be just normal human experience that's hard to work through. Well, we also work with that, the normal human experience that could be difficult to get through on your own, such as grief, such as loss, such as transition, such as goal setting, other things, all right? Or even characteristics about yourself that could be harmful that maybe no one's made you aware of. Okay, so those are the types of things that we do every Thursday evening. And so in honor of Men's Health Month, of course, we kind of kicked it off at the end of May and last week talking about what in general does men's health look like, where did the month derive from, what does that mean as it relates to mental health. So we talk very general. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be getting more specific on some of those men's health issues that could cause men to not at least engage in their mental health treatment, because that is our specialty area, is mental health. So tonight, of course, I'm not going to be talking about toxic men by myself, because y'all know how that goes if I was on here talking about it alone. So, of course, who do we have back with us?
Hello.
We have Jason, and he is our male therapist, our Black male therapist. We have a couple of tokens.
Right.
That's only because most of us are Black females, which in most other settings could be a token, but there's just a lot of us. So, yay, got a lot of diversity. So, we love it. So Jason has so graciously volunteered, or asked to come back on this month and contribute to Men's Health Month by sharing, of course, his experience around surrounding these topics as a man, as a clinician, like how directions he would point students and clients towards for growth and progression. So we're going to have him talking with us tonight about toxic masculinity. And this was good. I thought of it, and I thought of Jason only because he mentioned it in his interview and mentioned his journey through overcoming it. So I thought that was very, very important, and reason that he was a good fit for Yellowbird, because he was aware of and working on that. I'm a big proponent of people being aware of things that could, their downfalls, their flaws, their areas of their blind spots, being made aware of them and working on them overall, whether you be man, woman, Black, white, all that. Just accept where you may not be your best and work on improving it. So he has done that. So Jason, tell us, what does even toxic masculinity, we hear that term, but what does that even mean?
Yeah, so toxic masculinity is a few different things associated with it. I think the best way to describe it, the way that most people might be familiar with it, I think it's the nature of societal pressures or exaggerated masculine behaviors that men conform to because of a sense of pressure to do so. I think it's thoughts and behaviors that align with I think some of the things that I would describe to be uh, uh, overcompensation as far as power, self-reliance, things to the nature of this distorted view of who you are or who you're supposed to be, and in your relation to the workplace or within your family or within a relationship, things that you see or for some might be taught, things that you believe like this is what I'm supposed to do or this is how I'm supposed to act as a man. And so I think sometimes with that role per se, um, people can overcompensate, and that can be harmful to yourself, and that can be harmful to the others that are around you.
So, what might some of those thoughts and behaviors look like that can, be over exaggerated and become harmful?
I think um, one is how men are supposed to or not supposed to express emotion. I think that's one of the biggest ones. So again, going back to that self-reliance and that feeling as though, I'm not supposed to ask for help. I'm supposed to just push through this. I'm just supposed to take whatever I'm feeling or whatever I'm going through or whatever adversity I'm facing. I'm supposed to take risk and, deal with the consequences, or, I in the sense of entitlement in some aspects as well. Um, and just, kind of building up this role or this view of yourself that kind of puts you in a space that is unhealthy or unrealistic. And I think in that role, I would say, the lack of help seeking is probably the thing that I point to the most as far as mental health, but just in general, that I believe like the unhealthy component of it. I think that's something that I would see the most because there is I do believe there's a component of this that is ego based, a component of it that is the toxic component of it that has malicious intent. But then I think there's a component of it that is taught and learned. And we talked about, like not just mental health, but going to the doctor, going to any type of doctor, eye doctor, getting a yearly checkup. We talked about asking for help in that regard, but also asking for help at work or asking for help within your relationship or any type of help. So I do think some of it can be a learned behavior where it's like, I'm struggling with something internally or externally, and because I have this distorted sense that I'm a man, I should be able to take that on. I can deal with anything, all that type of stuff. I think that can be the nature of it, even for a well-intended man. That's just something that could be learned, and that as you get older and you face more responsibility, you face more adversity, that dealing with all of the pressure that comes with that can lead to some negative health outcomes, some negative personal outcomes, negative work outcomes. Overall, you can continue to spiral until you start to unlearn some of those thoughts and behaviors, and kind of pinpoint, where those things came from.
So, what might be like so that people might can follow it and understand the severity? What might be a toxic or unhealthy, toxic masculine thought or expectation?
Mhm.
What might the behavior look like, and how might it be harmful to that man or the people around him?
Yeah, I think maybe a unhealthy or distorted power dynamic. I think when you're in a place where you have been taught or you have learned or you expect that as a man you're supposed to be um, a provider in the sense that financially or I would say even really in all senses, you believe, let's take it from the example of you believe that, or you were taught that you're supposed to provide this, being financially, being a certain material things or whatever it might be. That's just your thought. So your sense of self-worth is wrapped into what you can provide. So if you cannot fulfill that, then you take a hit to your own self-esteem or your own sense of self-worth, because that has always been your belief that this is what you're supposed to do. And I believe that from in a lot of senses, that could lead to some risky behaviors or doing things to keep up an image or keep up with this idea of who you think you're supposed to be. And again, goes back to the not asking for help or not trying to, if you do have a partner, not trying to determine a way that you can work together, or defining, what do you want the dynamic of your relationship to be. And not to say that in many instances or many cases, men don't believe that in a well-intended way, but I think when it's perpetuated so much, you know, you begin to only see it in that way, and I think that's can be the harmful part of it. And I think some other aspects of that is the nature of, like, I would say, power, in the sense of, like, maybe the workplace, and when you don't see. So it's interesting. As we're doing this, I'm also going through, like, the Title IX stuff at work. So we're learning about sexual harassment and things like that, getting trained on that for those types of investigations. And it's the same. The nature of it is the same. The If you're in a workplace where you're there's a toxic environment because of how some men may view women in an outdated traditional sense as far as their roles in the workplace, then it leads to inappropriate jokes or inappropriate behavior or disrespectful, um, I guess, a disrespectful relationship or line of communication because of what you think your role is versus what their role is. And I think that's another negative aspect, especially in this in what we see today in the world. Of course, we're continuing to grow as a society, but today, I live in a society where my all of the bosses that I've had in my professional career have been women. So that has always been a dynamic I've known and seen. And so for me, I can fathom the idea of believing that there's a dynamic that just because I'm a man, that I somehow have more power in the workplace and would make comments like that. That's the easy way to lose your job. And so I think those types of things that are outdated, especially when you talk about the workplace, um, can lead to negative consequences for your career. I think that those types of thoughts and beliefs that might be outdated can perpetuate, behaviors, things that don't align with where the direction of society. And I think being able to recognize those things are really, really important. But again, it's not, that I think that's what people see or think about when we talk about toxic masculinity. But I think there's a lot of aspects of it from an emotional standpoint, or from a help seeking standpoint, or just pressures that we put on ourselves internally, that because we're trying to live up to this expectation, whether it is a societal expectation, because in some aspects, men have been taught from a societal standpoint, well, you should be a provider. So if that's what they have been taught or that's what they believe, then it's not, in some cases, there might not be a malicious intent behind it. It just might be I'm responding to this societal pressure, and I'm trying to figure out like who I am and what I'm supposed to do and where I fit in, and I'm just trying to go with the flow. And so I think that's why this conversation and like you said, getting a counselor is so important, because it is hard to see outside of yourself, or see yourself outside of yourself. And I think that's where I think that's where we try to get to when you're in therapy, or when you are trying to get to a place where you're trying to grow as a person, is what are some of the expectations I put on myself that are harmful and that are tied specifically to my gender.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you you like you said, and how we talked about, just the ideal of strength, of this, and somehow strength means that you don't need help, or something's
Right.
or nothing's ever wrong with you. Like,
Right.
so somehow if you are a human, you know what I'm saying? Like, and have human functionality, which is not superhuman, which is
Right.
not supernatural.
Right.
Like, somehow to be human is not manly.
Right.
And that, it just seems real. First of all, that's such a tall order. Like, if I were, I guess maybe because I'm not a man, but if I were a man, I would not want that. Just like I don't want the strong black woman thing. I don't want that either, because that is implying that somehow you have to be better than what you're made to be, which is human.
Right.
And so, like the strength and some other components, just as I was looking, through articles about it myself, or, dominating, or homophobia. Like, that was a big one. Like, straight men that are just so like, oh, I ain't gay, like, get so worked up about it. I'm like, but are you though? Like, the men that I see that are really comfortable with their sexuality, they can have, they don't mind. They can go into, as long as nobody's messing with them, but that's just anywhere. You don't want male, female, gay, straight. You don't want just people messing with you without your permission. But as long as nobody's messing with them, but they also don't think every man wants them just because they want a man. Like, those men, I can tell a lot about a man that behaves like that. I'm like, okay, wow, he's been doing a lot of work on himself. Maybe he's been exposed to more things. But then when you have that toxic, like, gay equals I need to kill it, or it, protect from it, it's kind of one of those key things that I would relate to it. And just, because anything feminine is bad with toxic masculinity. Like, anything that is societally, I'll say feminine, but it's really realistically human, to just show emotions, ask for help. Those are just human things. But according to this toxic masculinity, like, that's not something men should do at all. And it's just like, how harmful is that to who wants to be held to that standard?
Right. And it's so not natural. Like, it's not natural to live in this way. And I think when you're fighting back that vulnerability, and when you're fighting back those emotions, I think you're devolving into all of those negative feelings or emotions, or thoughts, and I think you're living outside of yourself, and I think that is the harmful aspect of it, especially internally, because we talked about this in the last live, as far as like, although we have these beliefs, or although we can be affected by toxic masculinity, you still see a high rate of mental health disorders, and specifically talking about depression, anxiety, and the rate of suicide as well. And so I think the issue is still very persistent, but we got to get to that place where we can start addressing these things so that men will get help. Because the issue is not an absence of the issue. It's just this is an additional factor that's working against the real mental health, physical health, and relationships, all of these different things, the aspects that make up our life. This is something that's working against that. But I think there's a as you mature and as you grow more vulnerable and build coping skills and work on all the things that we've discussed, I think you start to unlearn some of those things. And I think the thing that I relate to the most as far as those who have unlearned those behaviors or thoughts, from the vulnerability and the emotional aspect of it, I would say men who have daughters. I've often kind of heard them talk about how they've changed in that aspect, and like you said, like that rejection of femininity, and it's like I've that's often when I've heard examples of when a man has to relate more to their feminine side in the process of raising their daughters. And so I just think about, in that aspect, um, there are many opportunities for young men to grow from those thoughts and those ideals and to kind of connect with what reality is. And I think for me, from the standpoint, from like the role that I'm in, it can be difficult to discuss these things. Like, this is a conversation that I've had recently with another professional at Montevallo, is talking about, um, well, how do we approach this conversation? How do we start to put out in the open some of these things that we believe? And again, with some of these aspects, there are still things that I think naturally, if you get a group of men together, even well intended with good character, I still think there's certain things that that have been kind of pushed into you that it's hard not to respond
Mm-hmm.
in that way. And I don't think that's just with toxic masculinity. I think that's even in the Black culture,
Mm-hmm.
in the Black community. I think there are things that as Black individuals that we have been taught and that we have learned that it's just a natural response.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've leaned on my support system more as I've dealt with my own things. I've leaned on my support system a lot to help me push past that when I'm dealing with adversity or something that's unfamiliar to me. I've and that's a new response to to adversity or sickness or whatever it is that I'm dealing with. Um, I've learned to go to those people that are willing to challenge me and say, but you need to do this, or go ahead and make that appointment, or go ahead and do. That's something that in the past I may have not done. I may have waited until things got better, and if anything, reflected on like, "Ooh, that was tough," but never really in the moment said, "Well, let's figure this out now," or "Let's make those changes now," or "Let's look at this." But the difference is that support, and the nature of that vulnerability. And so, I think when I'm approaching these conversations with students or with clients, that's probably where I would start. That's where it's like, putting them back into that moment of saying, okay, you face this, how would you respond, and why that particular response? Where do you think that started, or where do you think that started? And kind of figuring out, going back to like, where was this behavior or this thought, initially learned?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And usually I bet you're finding that it's so far back,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
young. It could have been
Right.
something like the smallest instance of like showing an emotion just as a kid before you even know what your gender role is,
Mm-hmm.
or what society or your family expects for your gender role to be. But like crying, if
Right.
you cry and get a negative response to that cry, like a hit in the chest or
Mm-hmm.
suck it up or boys don't cry.
Right.
Like that is a
Right.
lot for a
Mm-hmm.
kid and who is probably showing the most pure level of vulnerability that he may ever show.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, there's no support. You're told that you're wrong. I could imagine that that is deeply impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. It,
Yeah.
it, I mean, that with that response alone, you're being trained to internalize your feelings from that moment on. And I think that's very dangerous to do from a young age on up. I mean, I can't imagine, and I think that's why it's so important to approach these conversations and begin to change that societal expectation and really teach people like in the moment what should we really say, how should we really approach that. I think I think when you talked about homophobia, I think that could be a little bit of the root of that, of don't cry, don't show emotion, because in that moment it's a natural response. And
Mhm.
so I think improving those relationships, because I mean, there's been many instances, whether it be through grief or through difficult situations, where even as a man that I've cried, um and you know having support from male figures in those moments, like your brothers or your dad. I think there's something special about that. I think that that alone kind of demonstrates a behavior that can be life changing for me, because then my response to students. I've been in the middle school, high school, and college setting. So my response to students, my response to my own family, males in my own family, nephews and cousins and things like that, it changes my response. And this is even before going into the counseling field. And so I think that's really important. I think we have to begin to kind of change the societal expectation and how we respond to things like that, and understand the ripple effect of those things. And I think that's where growth comes from in the first place, is someone kind of setting the precedent and people falling behind that. But I think it's really important, to your point. I really think it's important that we start looking at that and having conversations about that, because not everybody is going to get that experience or get that type of parenting or experience that in the workplace. But I think that brings another point, from toxic masculinity, from something I read, which is, if you're among a toxic environment where um, men, in that regard, are creating an environment where, as a man who may not believe some of the things that they're saying or doing, that pressure to conform to how they talk, like, so the inappropriate jokes, or the their belief of the power dynamic, but that pressure to make a joke or laugh at a joke or participate in things that are inappropriate, disrespectful, or toxic. I think that's another aspect of it, that we as men should address. And this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that me and my supervisor have talked about, as far as how can we address some of these toxic behaviors that are leading to Title IX cases, or leading to different things that is harmful to the community. And so I think that's something else that I hope we approach, and say, like, hey, at some point, as the men who do get it and do understand it, we gotta be the loudest voice, and we gotta be able to have that accountability because for those who are in roles like mine, I want to see young men grow and mature and not go through things that I've been through or that other men go through. And I think a lot of men, as they unlearn those things, that's what they want for the younger generation as well. It's like, don't put these unnecessary pressures and expectations on yourself, and you're diminishing your own quality of life by doing that and ruining the relationships around you. And I think with therapy, I think with, mature friendships, you begin to connect with you as a human and the person you are and your own character and your own values. And you can look beyond just the gender roles or those expectations. Getting beyond that is like the most freeing thing in the world.
And as talking about just different behavioral and societal changes, a couple things that popped into my mind is I've noticed in maybe the past maybe 5-10 years, movies where men have expressed emotion like crying, like weeping, crying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that, a lot of what we see on TV is a lot of where the societal norms originate from. We're very TV or media driven society. So to even be able to see that, if a little boy is watching a movie where a man cries and his dad just hit him in the chest, told him not to cry, that's gonna cause him at least pause.
Right.
To which one do I want to choose, and which one plays out better.
Right.
You'll probably see this man on TV crying, getting support and overcoming, even in spite of him showing emotion, and even seeking help, So those things, and even something very small, but more guys wearing the color pink and being okay with it,
Right.
It's just a color. There's no gender assigned colors. They're just colors,
Right.
So even men wearing lighter colors is very refreshing to see, like, oh, okay.
Right.
There's some progress.
Absolutely. And in that same vein, I also think like creating I think there's a space for, a positive masculinity or being able to connect with your more masculine side. I think there's a space for that can be um that positive aspects can come from that, or a sense of comfort or happiness can be associated with that. I believe in one of the recent interviews I did, I was asked that question, like, what does it mean to you to be a man? And I think my response in that was, well, before, this is what I thought it looked like, because this is what was like manifested by people. Like, this is what was shown. I thought it looked like this, but as I got older and I got to be around men that I wanted to emulate, I started to see that it looks like this. And I think it's really important that young men have male figures in their lives, positive male figures that they can emulate, that are willing to hold them accountable and help them grow. For those people who are spiritual, I think there's nothing more powerful, at least especially in my own experiences, having a older male figure that will pray with you and listen to you and talk with you about real vulnerable issues. And I think those types of things are missing sometimes. But those are the things that I can tell you that pull me out of those thoughts. And again, being a person that I've always felt like I've been a person of high character, high values, but still those men pulled me out of those thoughts and said, this is what it really looks like. So having that new thought of like, well, this is what I'm striving for. And so that when people say, well, this is the type of man or person or human Jason is, I want it to look like this. Um, and so I think that's important. Actually, with one of the groups that I'm leading, I do an activity called My Counselor, where we describe what type of counselor do we want to be and what's a correlating action to that. And so with that, it's like my counselor is empathetic, my counselor listens, my counselor is competent, things like that. But the action of like, what does that really look like? So they're empathetic, they're patient, or they're someone that allows me to work through this without judgment and bias and things to that nature. So I think in that same regard, it's like when you're really asking, what type of man do you want to be? I think that's something that as you get older and mature, maybe you want to be someone who is passionate and vulnerable and someone who has high character or someone who people feel they can confide in you. um and I still think there is a positive aspects of being someone that people think can depend on, even if it's for things they consider to be masculine, like climbing up a ladder or those traditional things, killing a bug or something like even if that's what you want people to think of when they see you, figuring out what type of person do you want to be and connecting with that instead of all of us having this universal monolithic thought of what we should do. I think it's growing from that and saying we're more unique than that.
Yeah, I mean, and it just seems like such a primitive way of thinking. And I would assume that men, I would assume, I could be wrong, that men who don't, who maybe didn't realize their toxic masculine ideals that they have, and then you show them a caveman and how cavemen acted. It's like, this is pretty much what you're saying you want to be, this
Right,
caveman. Like,
right,
is that really what you want to be?
right,
And take it a step further, don't bathe
right,
for several days and be dirt,
right,
have dirt under your nails. Is that
right,
really what you want?
right. I think that's so important that you connected with that um like you said, those primitive like behaviors. And you think about middle school, like for any guys that were in the middle school locker room, you understand just how immature it can be. And it's like as you grow from that, you don't want to be in that mind space and still believe and act, in those ways. I think at some point it's you can recognize that hey, like this is an old way of thinking. And I think that really could be the challenge sometimes, is challenging some of your own thoughts and beliefs that you once had, and seeing like, and I think this is something we should always be doing, is challenging ourselves and say, where can I grow? And challenging those things in a way that you understand that it's not for other people, all the time. That it's nothing wrong with you being able to look in the mirror and say, hey, this is something that has hindered me or that has gotten in my way or that has cost me certain things. I want to challenge myself to see if this is an area I need to grow in. And I think being able to have that type of imagery of like this is this caveman, like this is what you look like when you say or do things like this, that can be tough for people. But I think when the right people, like a therapist, like a mentor, like someone you respect and trust, is willing to challenge you in that way, it can really, really go a long way. And I think, for me to challenge myself and say, okay, I know I need to make this doctor's appointment, or I know I need to go to the eye doctor or do this, having someone that I know only wants the best for me to say, okay, don't leave this room or don't get off, this call until you've made this appointment. That is the type of accountability that I've had in the academic world, in the professional world, in my personal life, that has challenged me to grow from those things where I've like the not help seeking, not asking for help, or not being willing to admit that I'm struggling with something because you want to feel like you can be good at everything or you can figure anything out. It's the whole concept of like not reading the instruction manual because you want to feel like you can figure it out on your own. And so I think that's kind of um, what I hear when with that example.
So what might be some thoughts that is like that toxic masculinity may tell you? What narrative might toxic masculinity have for a man around therapy, that and why should he overcome or fight past that to go to therapy?
Absolutely. I think some of the things that our minds or that side of us might say is that one, you don't need anyone. I think that's number one. And in that same vein, like taking it a step further, like you don't need to talk to anyone. Like what will that help? Or things like that. Or the other aspect of that is the ego, and this is not in all cases when it comes to why men don't go to therapy, but from the toxic man standpoint, the ego of, you're strong enough to get over this, whether it's depression or whether it's symptoms of depression or symptoms of anxiety, like, you can get over that. That it's not strong enough to beat you or whatever it might be. And I think about some of the other natures of, um, I would say, someone who maybe even has or has had like a negative relationship with counseling or therapy in the past, in the sense of like maybe you went to one session or maybe you met a therapist or you went to even just a school counselor or something to that nature, and you have these, generalizations about it to where you think, it's not going to be helpful to you because you're different or you're unique in some way that therapy would not benefit you or help you. So just some of those things that that are close in nature to like cognitive distortions, that it's like we can't think in those terms, and it's like rejecting the openness and the willingness to do something that would help you, and it's not even just therapy but just self-care in general, things that negative behaviors or actions that we do, or negative coping mechanisms that we do, that we feel like that are harmful to us or harmful to those around us, that we say, I'd rather do this than ask for help. And that's always that first step. So when I'm not making that appointment, or when I'm not taking that medicine, or when I'm not doing something that I know I need to do, it stems from that I don't want to admit defeat, or I don't want to admit failure or feel like a failure, or feel a sense of weakness, and that goes back to that power dynamic. But those are real, feelings, and that's another thing that I think we can talk about, and that's something that if we're leading that group with men, and it's like, what is it about that sense of weakness or that sense of failure that we might be scared of? But that's why I love the ability to talk to um, men, mentors who have been there and who have been through failure, and understand, what is a healthy way to respond to that. And so that's what I think. The more men we see who have been through this and who have unlearned these things and learned new things, and who have been to therapy, or who have understand how to get in line with these feelings and emotions and vulnerability and feelings of weakness and things like that. I think they really help us, push past that, and to not be, limited by that, because it does limit you when you're not willing to, take. I think about from a work perspective. Um, if I need help or I need to grow in some way, then the more I wait to ask for help, the more I'm missing out on new opportunities for growth, opportunities for promotion, opportunities to take whatever that next step is, because I'm keeping myself at this level, at this wall, because I'm not asking for what I need to take that next step.
So, men, I have made it very, very simple for you to simply text the word new to this number so we can, if you have any of the aforementioned thoughts that you identify with that Jason was listing and talking about, very real thoughts and emotions just around mental health, getting help, um, any of those cognitive distortions, text the word new so that we can get you on that path to truly be in a place of strength and stability, and in a healthy place of wanting to provide and leadership, like healthy, doing those things in a healthy way. And what does that look like? Because it's a lot different from the toxic, rigid way. The healthy way is going to offer more flexibility to you. And how can you overcome very real human emotions that you as a man, me as a woman, us as humans all have? So yeah, so this is good. Another good one, Jason. Another good one. Do you have any other last words or any encouragement or guidance you can give our guys as it relates to men's health or men's mental health specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I know, you said it earlier, being an agency with more women, I know that we work with a lot of men, and I think it's unbelievable that this agency and would use this platform to still promote and invest in the mental health of men. And I think that alone is a sign, for our men who are listening or might be connected, or the people who are listening that know men who might be suffering. I think that's so unique, and I think that's special, and I think that's what we need. And so again, I'm just so appreciative that we're taking this time to talk about these things, because I think it opens the door for our men to know that there are people out there that will do everything in their power to empathize with you and understand what you're going through, or what you're feeling, or the things that you want to grow from or grow into. And so I'm just really encouraged by this conversation, just what we've been doing this month. And I think, this is us moving in the right direction, and you showing that, hey, it's not just men, because as you know, there's not a lot of black male therapists. There's not really a lot of male therapists in general, especially accessible to us in our particular area. But showing that this is a community effort, just like a lot of other things that we value and that we want to support. The growth of men and men's mental health is one of those things for Yellowbird, and I know for me, and I'm excited about where we're headed, now, knowing that we have this community of people trying to do better and trying to change things.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Jason. Thank you for your contribution. And I'm sure we will see you again soon.
I hope so. Thank you, Dominique. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too.
Goodbye.
Bye.
So yeah, guys, again, this is our contribution with our educational campaigns that we're going to be doing. We had Jason to really break down and tell us about toxic masculinity. We're going to talk about what men's self-care looks like. We're going to look at the actual biological portions of the brain that are affected when men have a specific emotion. We're going to talk about what does it look like for men to be depressed and be unable or feel unable to emote. So we got y'all. We got it jam-packed this month. So you definitely want to make sure that you are here with us every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so that you can view it with us. Also, please share if you want to contribute to Men's Health Month. Something very easy and free that you can do is just simply share this live, so that a man on your timeline or men on your timeline who need to hear what we're talking about are able to get the content. So please, again, share this live. Thank you for everybody that's watching. Thank you for everybody that's watching the replay. Thank you for everybody that's sharing. And also, too, remember, you want to go to yellowbirdcounseling.com. You want to go to yellowbirdcounseling.com so that you can register for our newsletter. You want to register for our newsletter because not only will you know what live topics we're discussing each week for the entire month, but you'll also know which lives we're going to be doing the $100 Cash App giveaway. And the only people that are going to know and be eligible to win that Cash App giveaway is those that are in our text community or those that are on our newsletter. So if you want to be eligible to win, okay, you're going to have to go on to our website, yellowbirdcounseling.com. Register for that newsletter. It's free. All you do is put your first, last name, and your email. That's it, and you're in there. And we'll send you those so that you'll have it. You'll also know what events and groups that we'll be doing, collaborations that we'll have. You'll know when we have open slots, more specifically on my caseload. Lots of stuff is in that. So you want to be registered. But in the meantime, in between time, go on ahead and text the word new. And this is really for male or female. This is how you can receive services from Yellowbird Counseling in general. If all you can do is text the word new, then, and you're not sure what else to say, just text the word new to this number and we can get you set up real simple and easy. So until next time, text that word new, especially if you're a man. Make that contribution to yourself if you're not already in therapy, to text the word new to that number so that we can at least start getting you on the right path as it relates to mental health and hopefully leading to spiritual and physical health as well. All right, guys, it's been great. Love y'all. See you next week.